All right, everyone, let's get started. So I'm going to prep my surface by doing one coat of white paint, and then I'm going to come back and do a second coat of white pearl. Now I'm going to make my grid lines. I am using a 16 arm stencil. Once I get the inside of the grid finished, I am going to extend these lines out to the edge, and I'm going to extend the circles. Every 2 centimeters, I am going to add another circle. All right, so in the center, our center dot, I'm going to use silver. And anytime I use silver in this design, I'm going to add a top dot later with my glittery silver twinkles, and that's going to make it really sparkly. So the center dot is going to be 15.5 millimeters. Now, if you're not working with the same dotting set that I am, 15.5 millimeters is slightly under 3/4 of an inch. And it is 1.5 centimeters. You can always add it with a paintbrush. It does not have to be with the dotting tool. So I am going to get this baby in there. I'm going to add a little extra paint. Usually when I'm using the larger set of tools, they don't make the cleanest dots. So I'm just going to make sure this is nice and round. Clean it up a bit because our center dot is super important. So like over here, there's a little bit of a squish out. I'm just cleaning that up so it looks nice and round. All right, so center dot, about 15.5 millimeters in silver. We've got 6 paint actual colors that we're using. The color list is in the supply list. I've got Royal Fuchsia, so I'm going to get all these in my little paint cups here. I've got my Jack-o'-lantern orange. Of course, you can change these. You can make a brighter rainbow by using more primary colors. You can use, this one was bright yellow. You can use a muted rainbow if bright colors are not your thing. Sour apple. Laguna. And then I've got my brilliant purple. So Royal Fuchsia, Jack-o'-lantern orange, bright yellow, sour apple, Laguna, brilliant purple. Those are the 6 colors that I am going to be using today, in addition to the silver. So I've got those all in my paint cups. All right, we're going to start with our first row of dots. I'm going to use a 1.5 millimeter tool. You can either use a stylus, or if you've got the same tools I have, you may have a dotter. And we're going to add 16 1.5 millimeter dots. So I'm going to start by doing my north, south, east, and west. I always start that way. It helps me keep things even. Then I go halfway in between those points. That gives me 8. And then once I have 8, I go halfway in between those. And that gives me my 16. Next, I'm going to grab a 3 millimeter tool, and I'm going to add 16 orange dots, and these are going to be offset. That means they're going to be halfway in between the previous row. You're going to see me skipping a space. Again, that's so I can keep things even. So I like to go through, skip a space, and then I'll come through and fill those in. So I start with 8 dots and go around a second time to make 16. With the center dot and these 2 rows, I am about to my first guide ring. Next, I'm going to use yellow. Because I don't want my background lines to bleed into the yellow, I'm going to clean those off. You don't have to do this if you have an opaque yellow that you're using. Sometimes I just like to cheat a little bit. So now I'm removing up to the second ring, but I'm keeping that ring there because that's going to help me. You can skip this step if you don't feel like you need to do this, not a big deal. I just wanted to explain for the video what I was up to. All right, I'm going to take my 3mm stylus and we are going to add 16 yellow swipes, and I'm going to do these where the guidelines were. So they are going to end up in between the orange. They're not actually going to go in between the orange, but that's the direction. So I'm going to start up here just beneath my guideline, my ring, and I'm going to pull inward. We're going to do 16 of these. All right, next what we're going to do is we're going to walk the dots around each side of these. I'm going to use my 2.5mm, and the first thing I'm going to do is add my center dot. So I'm going to use my sour apple green, and I'm going to place that dot just above. I'm going to go all the way around, so we have 16 of these. Once I have all of those, I'm going to switch to my 1.5mm stylus, and I'm going to walk the dots on each side. When you walk the dots, you dip once and you continue dotting. So I'm going to dip, and I can fit 6 down each side. thing I'm going to do is get my 4mm tool. We are going to use Laguna, which is our cyan blue, and I'm going to get a tool that I can pull with. So we're going to create pins. So I've got this pointed tool. You can also use your smallest stylus if that's easier for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this 4mm dot. I'm going to put it just in between and slightly up from the edge of, let me show you. So I've got my circle here with my green dots. So my green dot falls just at the bottom of this 4mm dot that I've created. So I'm going to put that dot here. I am going to fill it up, add just a little more paint to the top of it. I'm not making it any bigger, just making it a little wetter. Then I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to pull it into a pin, and that pin's going to come down into what we just created, the yellow and the green. Okay, so I'm going to do that all the way around. And you can do 1 or 2 of these at a time, but I would not do all your dots first and then go around and pull them, because they'll start to dry and then they won't be clean. They'll kind of get crusty and crumbly. So I'm going to work 2 at a time. And you see I'll create my dot, I added a little more paint, and then I just pulled downward. Go back to my 1.5mm tool. Again, you could use your stylus if you prefer, and I'm going to use the purple. And next to, or in between these Laguna dots, we've got a line, and I am going to create a double dot of purple. So I'm going to dip and dot, and then dip and dot, so that I've got 2 dots in between each Laguna. And see how I've got one each side of the line that intersects there. So we're going to do that all the way around. this is 1.5 millimeters and Brilliant Purple. Next, I'm going to grab my 6mm tool, and we are going to use our silver. And right next to that, I am going to add 1 silver dot. Now, this is right where I've got a ring. So I'm going to use that line or my ring and my line cross to place my dot. So we're going to end up with 16 silver dots, 6mm. Next, I'm going to get my 3mm stylus, and I'm going to go around. We're going to put a center dot at the top of each of these with 3mm, and then I am going to swipe on each side. So I'm going to start with a center dot, 3mm, purple. Once I have all of those, I'm going to switch to my smaller end, 2.5mm. I'm going to continue using that purple, but I am going to swipe around each side of that silver dot. So we've got a dot and then a swipe on each side. 2.5mm purple. Next, I'm going to get my 3mm tool, and I'm going to use my Fuchsia pink. And next to this Laguna pin, I'm going to put a dot. I'm going to do this all the way around so we end up with 16 of these. Once I go all the way around with the 3mm, I'm going to switch to a 4mm tool, and I'm going to stick with that pink fuchsia. And then in between, in the space between these purple swipes here, I'm going to add a 4mm dot all the way around. Then we are going to stick with that pink fuchsia. I'm going to use an 8mm tool, and we are going to add 16 8mm dots. And so I'm going to put this one centered right next to that dot we just placed. I am now at this 4th ring. These pink dots go just a smidge over it for me. It's okay if you're working a little looser or a little tighter, but you want to be close to that 4th ring. Next, we're going to add a center dot and walk the dots around these pink dots here. And so I'm going to use a 3mm tool. Again, you can use a dotting tool or a 3mm stylus, and orange. I'm going to do my center dot first. So we're going to go all the way around with a 3mm dot in the center. once you have all of those, I'm going to walk the dots. For walking, you need a stylus. So I've got my 3mm stylus, and I'm going to dip and walk on each side. Okay, next we're going to create some pins, and we're going to do this on the line. So I'm going to go up to my next ring here. So this is my 5th ring, and we're going to use yellow. And so before I get started with yellow, you're going to see me, I'm going to use a Q-tip, and I'm just going to lighten this marking line just a little bit because this yellow is a little transparent. So this is what I do to keep myself from seeing that through my artwork. All right, for this step, I'm going to use a 4mm tool, and I'm going to use a stylus. So I am going to just below this 5th ring, I'm going to make a dot. Then I'm going to get my 3mm stylus. I'm going to tap in the center of the dot I just made, and I'm going to pull this inward. Okay, we're going to do that all the way around. So it's a 4mm. Then I'm going to get my 3mm stylus with more paint, and I'm going to pull right down that line. Again, you can do 1 or 2 at a time, but I wouldn't work beyond that just because they start to dry a little bit, and then your paint is not as flexible and crisp. All right, just for a moment, I'm going to grab my marking pencil, and next to each one of these pins that we just created, I'm going to visualize a line from the top edge down to the top of that orange dot. So kind of a triangle, okay? So I'm going to go around and I'm going to mark this. This will help me keep my shape. Now, if you're good at visualizing your lines, you may not have to do this. This is just kind of a little cheat that I can use. So you can see I've gone all the way around with that. And the reason why I'm going to do that, it's going to help me place my swipes in the next few steps. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is we're going to use green and our 3mm tool. I'm going to mix this up and just make sure it's still not clumpy. All right, so we're going to add swipes on either side, and it's important that I stay within this triangle. So as we move, my swipes are going to get smaller. So my green swipe here is just going to be slightly smaller than my yellow. So I'm going to use 3mm, swipe inward, and I'm going to do that on each side. So see how they're slightly shorter than the yellow, and I'm going to stay within that triangle I created. once I go all the way around with those green swipes, I'm going to go down to my 1.5 millimeter size. I'm going to switch to my blue Laguna, and I'm going to repeat this. Again, I'm going to make them a little shorter than the green. One swipe on each side, all the way around 1.5 millimeters. I'm going to continue using my 1.5 millimeter tool, and the next color I want to use is purple. This time I'm going to make more of a swoop, so I am going to add a little curve to this one instead of a straight swipe, but I'm going to stay within that triangle, and this one is going to kind of follow the shape of the curve of the orange dots next to it. So this is what I mean here. See how that purple follows, it's got a little curve, it follows the shape of that orange. That's what we're doing. So we're going to complete that triangle with a 1 millimeter purple swipe, or swoop, whatever you want to call it, right next to that orange, in between the orange and the blue. Next, I'm going to get my 3 millimeter stylus, and we're going to walk the dots. And so I'm going to start at the tip of this yellow pin. I'm going to make a dot, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So let me put that up close for you. So it's walking the dots, but only 3 dots. So we're going from the tip of that yellow to the purple here. Once you finish walking those dots, you're going to grab your 4mm tool and we're going to put a dot inside that little dip of the triangle. So I am going to add 16 purple dots. In between the dip of that triangle. So in between each section, a 4mm purple. All right, we are going to get our 3mm tool. Again, you can use a stylus or a dotting tool. And I'm going to use my pink fuchsia paint. Now on this ring here, this is ring 5 that I'm working on. In between these two yellows next to the purple, I'm going to add a set of double dots. Now I'm going to get these on the line. I want them to be close together and close to that purple. Now again, if your spacing is a little different, maybe you're not working right on that line. But here it is a little closer for you. So 2 equal double dots. So dip and dot, and then dip and dot again. So we end up with 32 dots in in double increments there, not 2 inches, it's just double. Next, we're going to grab an 8mm tool and we are going to work with the silver paint. Alright, so 8mm, silver paint. We're going to add a dot right next to our double pink. So 16 silver dots with our 8mm tool. All right, I'm gonna grab my 3mm stylus and my fuchsia pink. And I'm gonna create a center dot just above this. So it's 3mm, fuchsia pink, center dot. Then I'm going to switch to my 2.5mm. I'm going to use my orange. And I'm going to walk the dots on each side. All right, for the next step, I'm going to use orange and my 3mm tool. So I'm going to create a set of triple dots. So I'm going to create the first dot right on the line. Again, if you're working a little wider or tighter than me, that's fine. But there's going to be a set of 3, like a crown on top of this. So it's dip dot, dip dot, dip dot again for that crown. Once you create that crown with the orange all the way around, we're going to switch to our 2.5mm side and yellow, and I'm going to walk the dots down each side with yellow. I can fit about 5 yellow dots comfortably. Next, I am going to grab my 4mm tool, and we're going to add one yellow dot right above the center there, right above that crown of orange. Once you go all the way around with that yellow center dot, I'm going to use my 3mm stylus and my sour apple green, and I'm going to walk the dots down each side. I can fit 7 on each side comfortably, so that's what I am aiming for. once you finish walking the dots, we are going to add some swipes. So I'm going to use my 3mm tool and my blue Laguna color. And for this one, I'm going to start close to the green, and right next to the walking the dots is where I'm going to go. I'm going to start this right about row 6 here. So next to the green, and I'm going to swipe downward. I'm going to do both sides, but I'm going to do the right side first, and then go back and do the left. Now normally I would go around and make sure that all of my swipes went all the way to the bottom. For example, see how this one's a little shorter? Normally I would go in and I would just pull that a little bit farther. I'm not as worried about that today because I've got another swipe that's going to go right next to it, which will hopefully hide some of that. So I have swooped the Laguna around each of those petals with my 3mm tool, and I'm going to switch to my 2.5mm end, and I'm going to use the purple, and I'm going to pull a shorter swoop down towards the bottom. So I'm going to switch to the smaller end. Now in between each of these petals I've got a line, and so I'm going to start halfway down this square, and I'm going to pull that in towards those pink dots. So let me show you. Let me mix up my purple a little bit here. You'll see I do a lot more mixing before I dot the longer I have these paints out. So I'm going to start about halfway down. I'm going to touch that line and pull that towards that pink dot there. Now for this one, I do want it to come pretty far down. So if you need to adjust your swoops after you pull it, go ahead and do that. Next, I'm going to grab my 4mm tool, and we are going to create some 4mm swipes. So I'm also going to need my 3mm stylus. So I am going to use purple, and I'm going to go all the way up to line 7 or ring 7, and just inside of that I'm going to create that 4mm dot. Make sure there's plenty of paint in there. Then I'm going to get my 3mm stylus, and I'm going to pull that inward. So this is on the line just inside ring number 7. So it's a 4mm dot, and then pull, pull. Once I have the purple all the way around, I am going to use my pink fuchsia and my 3mm stylus. And on each side, I'm going to pull a swoop on each side of that purple. And I give it just a little bit of curve. So we're going to go all the way around with the pink and the purples. I'm going to get some more silver in my palette here because we're going to do some silver dots. All right, I'm going to grab my 8mm tool, and I'm going to add 2 silver dots. in between each section. So 2 silver dots, it's right above that petal. I'm going to evenly space them. Now for me, this hits right about that 7th line or 7th ring. So we're going to go all the way around with these silver dots. Those are going to be so pretty when we add the glitter on top. Once you do that, we are going to get the marking pencil back out, and I'm going to just cut this segment in half. So your halfway point should be where your yellow dot is from the previous petal there, and I'm just going to extend that line visually. And this just helps us, we're gonna keep these dots centered as we work outwards towards the edge. So I've got segments all the way around. In total, we've got 32 lines or 32 segments. All right, we are going to use lots of paint for this, so if you need to refill your purple, go ahead. I'm going to grab my 6mm tool, and we are going to create 64 dots around this piece. And so I'm going to start by placing 1 on each guideline. That gives us 32. And then once I have all of those, I'm going to continue around and add 1 in between. You can see here I've got 1 dot on each guideline. Now I'm going to go through and do 1 dot halfway in between. Right, once you've finished that, and that will take you a few minutes, we're going to repeat this with the Laguna blue, 6mm dots. This time I'm going to offset them. Actually, I'm sorry. These are 7mm dots. We're supposed to go up a size. All right, 7mm Laguna. These are offset, so 1 dot in between each of the purple. So you're going to go all the way around with the Laguna blue, and then you are going to go up a size to 8 millimeters, and we're going to use the sour apple green, and we're going to go all the way around again. These dots are going to be offset again, so we are back on the lines. Oops. This placement should be right where the row and the line cross. So I'm going to go all the way around and do those, and then I'm going to go in between. It just helps me with my spacing a bit. I am just making a mess with this green. Alright, that's a lot of dots. We're in the home stretch for the base of our design. So next I'm going to get my 2.5 millimeter stylus tool, and I'm going to use yellow paint, and I'm going to add a yellow dot in between each of these purple dots. 2.5 millimeters yellow. I know this yellow does not show up well on camera, especially with this pearl background, but it is there. Be careful as you work not to put your fingers in the blue or the green. By adding all these dots and the design elements in between, it lessens that kind of gingham patchworky feel when it's just the dots here around the edge. It also allows us to place the color next to its complement, which makes the colors really pop. Once you get all the way around with those yellow, I'm going to continue using my 2.5 millimeter tool, but I'm going to switch to orange, and I'm going to add a set of double dots. So in between the green and the purple, I'm going to go dot, 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 dot. And I'm going to do this all the way around. Now, I do not have to re-dip, I'm just doing this set of double dots all at the same time. Dot, dot, dip, dot, dot, dip. So again, lots of dots. That takes us a while. The next color I'm going to use is the pink fuchsia. 3mm tool. I'm going to dip and I am going to swipe in between each one of these green dots. So we're swiping towards the edge. Now there's one more part of the base of this design that I want to add, and we're going to go back in a little bit, so be extra cautious if the edges of your paint are wet here, but I'm going to use my 3mm tool and my orange paint, and I'm going to go back to this petal here. I want to add a swoop going from the orange towards the purple. So I'm going to use my 2.5mm end, and I'm going to pull from the orange towards the purple. That just fills in a little bit of that design. I definitely, when I planned this, wanted that pearl to show through. That is definitely supposed to be part of the design. So there are definitely spaces in here that could be filled in if you really wanted to with some more dots. I like having the background be a part of this piece, and it really just doesn't do it justice on camera here. But the pearl is absolutely beautiful. But this is the base of our design. So I'm going to let this completely dry, and then we're going to come back and do top dots.